Hi, we're on day 3 of our Persuasion book, Win Bigly by Scott Adams, and we are on the part starting about the facts. On August 13th, 2015, I predicted in my blog that Donald Trump had a 98% chance of winning the presidency based on his persuasion skills. A week earlier, the most respected political forecaster in the United States, Nate Silver, had put Trump's odds of winning the Republican nomination at 2%. In his 538.com blog, in those early days of the election, the overwhelming majority of pundits in the business regarded Trump as a novelty and a sideshow. Persuasion is all about the tools and techniques of changing people's minds with or without facts or reason. When I started writing favorable blog posts about Trump's persuasion talents, it felt like going to war alone in California. Where I live, it seemed as if most Trump supporters were in hiding because of the social and career risks of publicly supporting him. I wasn't counting on anyone's having my back in this fight. Luckily, I was wrong. Trump's Twitter followers adopted me immediately and had my back every step of the way. When the critics came after me on Twitter and everywhere and elsewhere, Trump supporters flooded in to back me. I didn't ask them to do it. They just did. One of my motivations for writing this book is that so many people who supported me on Trump, on Twitter, specifically asked me to write it. This book is a favor returned. In the tab here, he says, some of the rare and notable predictors of Trump's win included Mike Cernovich, Ann Coulter, Stefan Moino, Milo Yiannopoulos, Bill Mitchell, Robert Ballew, John McLaughlin, Alan Lichtman, Nigel Farage, Piers Morgan, and late to the party, Michael Moore. Persuasion tip number 2. Humans are hardwired to reciprocate favors. If you want someone's cooperation in the future, do something for that person today. Persuasion tip number 3, persuasion is effective even when the subject recognizes the technique. Everyone knows that store's list price at $9.99 because $10 sounds like way too much. It still works. So persuasion is effective even when the subject recognizes the technique. Everyone knows that stores like list prices at $9.99 because $10 sounds like way too much. It still works. So you know you're being persuaded by the $9.99, but you know it's $10 too. And you still get it because it's only $10. So specifically asked me so one of the motivations for Scott Adams writing the book is that so many people who supported him on Twitter specifically asked him to write it. So this book is a favor returned. By the way, reciprocity is a big thing in persuasion. When you do someone a favor, it triggers an automatic reciprocity reflex in the recipient. Humans are hardwired to reciprocate kindness. Sales professionals use persuasion methods all the time. If a salesperson buys you lunch or fixes a problem for you, you're being persuaded. You might think you can resist persuasion techniques just by recognizing them in action, but knowing the technique won't protect you as much as you might think. See persuasion tip number 3. So why did I say that Trump had exactly a 98% chance of winning when I couldn't possibly know the odds? That's a persuasion technique you saw Trump use the intentional wrongness persuasion play over and over, and almost always to good effect. The method goes like this. Number 1, make a claim that is directionally accurate, but has a big exaggeration or factual error in it. Number 2, wait for people to notice the exaggeration or error and spend endless hours talking about how wrong it is. Number 3, when you dedicate focus and energy to an idea, you remember it. And the things that have the most mental impact on you will irrationally seem as though they are high in priority, even if they are not. That's persuasion. If I had boringly predicted that Trump would win the election without any odds attached to it, the public would have easily shrugged it off as another minor celebrity's irrelevant opinion. But if I make you pause to argue with me in your mind about the accuracy of the 98% estimate, it deepens my persuasion on the main point, that Trump has a surprisingly high likelihood of winning. I picked 98% in my Trump prediction because Nate Silver of 538.com was saying 2%. I did that for branding and persuasion purposes. It is easier to remember my prediction both because of the way it fits with Silver's prediction and for its audacity, which people perceived as wrongness. The prediction was designed to attract attention, and it did. It was also designed to pair my name with Nate Silver's name to raise my profile by association. That worked too. Social media folks mentioned me in the same sentence with Silver countless times during the election, exactly as I had hoped. And every mention raised my importance as a political observer because I was being compared with someone already important in that field. Keep in mind that at this point in our story, I was playing the wrong sport. I was a cartoonist writing about politics and persuasion. I needed whatever credibility I could get to build an audience for my Trump blogging. Using a little bit of wrongness, my precise 98% prediction, I managed to attract more attention than I would have otherwise, and that conferred on me some credibility by association. As long as I was literally in the same sentence with Nate Silver, I would gain some credibility by proximity alone. Trump used the intentional wrongness persuasion play often, and it seemed to work every time, at least in terms of attracting attention where he wanted it. It even works when you know he's doing it. If you're talking about whatever topic he wants you to focus on, he has your mind right where he wants it, even if you are criticizing him for his errors while you were there. For example, take Trump's campaign promise that he would build a wall on the border of Mexico. Common sense tells you that solid walls are not the best solution for all types of terrain. In many locations, the most cost-effective solutions might include wire fences or digital monitoring of various types or something else. If Trump had wanted to be accurate, he would have mentioned all of those solutions every time he talked about the border security. He did make some casual admissions that the border would be secured in different ways in different places, but most of the time he ignored those details, and wisely so, by continuing to call it a wall. Whether without details, he caused the public and the media to view that as an error. So they argued about it. They fact-checked it. They put together cost estimates. They criticized Trump for not understanding that it couldn't be a wall the entire way. How stupid can that be? And when they were done criticizing Trump for the error of saying he would build one big solid wall, the critics had convinced themselves that border security was a higher priority than they had thought coming into the conversation. The ideas that you think about the most are the ones that automatically and irrationally rise in your mental list of priorities. And Trump made us think about the wall a lot. He did that because he knew voters would see him as the strongest voice on the topic. It also sucked up media energy that might have focused on political topics he didn't understand at the same depth as his competitors. Master persuaders move your energy to the topics that help them, independent of facts and reason. So this is persuasion tip number 4. The things that you think about the most will irrationally rise in importance in your mind. I said Trump is the best persuader I have ever seen in action. The wall is a perfect example. Consider how much discipline it took for him to avoid continually clarifying that his wall was really a patchwork of solutions that depend on the terrain. In order to pull off this type of weapon-grade persuasion, he had to be willing to endure brutal criticism about how dumb he was to think he could secure the border with a solid wall. To make those criticisms go away, all Trump needed to do was clarify that the wall was actually a variety of different border solutions, depending on cost and terrain. Every time he mentioned it, easy as pie. But the master persuader didn't want the critics to be silenced. He wanted them to make border control the biggest issue in the campaign just by talking nonstop about how Trump's wall was impractical. As long as people were talking about the wall, Trump was the most important person in the conversation. the master persuader moves energy and attention to where it helps most. And about the facts and details, not so important. Those can get worked out later. I don't believe Trump purposely injects errors into his work, except in the form of oversimplification and hyperbole, as in the wall example. That stuff is intentional for sure. But for the smaller errors, it is more that he doesn't bother to correct himself. I use a similar technique with my blog when someone points out a typo. Sometimes I have the typo because it makes you pause and reread the sentence a few times to figure out what the typo was supposed to mean. The mistake attracts your attention to my writing, and that's what a writer wants. I want your focus. So that's persuasion tip number 5. An intentional error in the details of your message will attract criticism. The attention will make your message rise in importance, at least in people's minds, simply because everyone's talking about it. Some mistakes are just ordinary mistakes. But when you see a consistent stream of mistakes from a master persuader, just be open to the possibility that some of those mistakes are about controlling your focus and energy. When you first saw the title of this book, did you think to yourself that Trump doesn't say bigly, he says big league? If you noticed my title error, it probably helped you remember the book. Bigly, not big league. And now whenever you hear the words highly or big league in some other context, it will make you think of this book. The things you think about the most and remember best seem more important to you than other things. That's the persuasion I engineered into the title. During the presidential campaign, it seemed that candidate Trump was making one factual error over another. Social media and the mainstream media were in a feeding frenzy. They called him a liar, a con man, and just plain stupid. Some went so far as to question his sanity. Even more puzzling, Trump often stuck to his claims after the media thoroughly debunked him in front of the world. He still didn't budge. It was mind-boggling. No one was quite sure if the problem was his honesty, his lack of homework, or some sort of brain problem. But one thing we all knew for sure was that it was hard to ignore. All right, come back tomorrow for the next part. Facts are weaker than fiction. Like, subscribe, comment. Thanks.